Let's check that, Ashley. No, okay, we'll deal with that. All right, 11 a.m. STAT3004, STAT7304. Okay, now. Hold on. Okay. 11 a.m. All right, so welcome back to the course. It's been probably a week of transition where you've transitioned from being more outside to being more inside. The course has transitioned a bit as well, as you probably saw. What I'm going to do in this meeting is mostly speak about the structure of the course, actually, and then show the resources and start to speak about them, and do some computation with Julia, of course, related to Markov chains. And this will put us on a transition towards the new mode of the course. Okay, so that is the goal. Now, in terms of meetings, I'm going to have 2 meetings like this. We're going to have 2 meetings like this a week, at this time on Tuesday and at the same time on Friday. So the 8 a.m. meeting on Friday we won't do. But those meetings will not be lesson meetings. They will be meetings where you can actually ask me questions, just as I had once a 2 p.m. meeting where students could walk into my office and ask questions. That happened for a week or 2. Okay, so these are going to be meetings where you actually ask me questions. What I will do is put out a few YouTube videos that annotate the references and get you going on the material. Okay, so the mode of study is going to be 2 Zoom meetings with a lecturer a week, 1 Zoom meeting with a tutor a week. Okay, and watching videos that I will very shortly create and put up. Okay, questions about that? Ask at any time. Please do if needed. Now, you've seen the course profile, I assume. So the assessment has completely changed. Okay, just in view of the fact that we're in this new mode. So there's a first project. That's this first project. It's doing a bit. That's a 15% project. And then the second project is slightly heavier because you'll be already in good shape for working on the second project after the first project. Those projects they have some problem solving, but they are computational in nature. Yeah, you can see my iPad where I'm showing the course profile. Ashley, can you give a thumbs up if you do? Okay, you're giving me an elegant nod. All right. I can't even see your thumb in the camera. Okay, very good, Ashley. Thank you. All right. So we've got these 2 projects. Then the problem set is your more traditional type of problem set, which will be comprised of problems that were from previous years, but also new ones that I'll make. And the problem set prepares you for the exam. Okay, so it's kind of 2 types of things. So the project is a bit more computational, even though there's modeling and problem solving, and the problem set prepares you for the exam. Sometimes we would put it the other way around, but since projects take time, I thought we actually start with the project. Okay. Any questions about that, about the assessment? And how to hand in and what exactly are the projects, etc. You'll get all this information. So if you go here to assessment this is the course website. Okay, so there's nothing here now. This is project 1. You click on that and you see that it's under construction. You'll see that in a second on your screen. So it will be over construction soon. All right, so that will be project 1, and project 2 will quickly follow. You'll have these things sooner rather than later because who knows, maybe I need to be deported to Antarctica or something like that. So every course in UQ, just so you know, has a buddy. So if for some reason I'm not able to teach, then a buddy is able to teach. Okay, that's how it goes. This course has 2 buddies. We're all buddies. With the tutorials, the tutors will be there to help you on specific questions that you ask regarding the projects, not so much computational. Don't expect them to help you directly with computational stuff. I mean, it might be that they can, but not directly with that, but more with the Markov chain content. It's related to that. All right. Now, this blob here in the course website that you see, I assume all of you have read that. I also assume that most of you did what I suggested that you do on Blackboard, which is actually get these 12 pieces of text. SP1, SP2, SP4, MC1, 2, 3, 6, EM3, EM4, SWJ 2, 3, and 10. Okay, so let me show you my pieces. Here they are. I have files for each of them. Okay, that's EM3, for example, and that's SP1. And you can have hard copies or soft copies. I do recommend that you have local copies because these 12 chapters are going to be your friends. With the SWJ, the Statistics with Julia, you don't have a chapter like this that's separated into a single chapter, but you have here the full URL for the draft of the book. Okay. Okay. So that here is oh, I can see a delay on the iPad screen, but anyway. So the draft on the book. Now, so let me assume that you've got those PDF files and or have printed them. They are really your the core of your study. Now that's a lot of material. So 12 chapters, even though it's from 4 books, 12 chapters, that constitutes a whole book. You don't need to read every little thing in every chapter, but I'll soon have a study guide which will walk you through, read this, do that, read this, do that, read this, do that, okay? So this is self-learning with a bit of YouTube videos from me that kind of highlights certain things and reading the chapters. Is it online learning, which is what the world is transitioning to? Well, I'm not sure if it's online learning. Let's call it offline learning. I mean, there's this great concept called a book, and you can actually, you're a third year or more mathematician. Most of you can open a book, or at least you're extremely mathematically trained, if some of you are doing an economics degree or similar. Okay, so you can open a book and read. Okay, so that's kind of the core thing. Questions about that? Any interaction, questions, thoughts? No, not so far. At any point, please engage. All right. Now the second, oh yes, Lawrence. Will we have a schedule? Yes. So Lawrence asked, will we have a schedule and it's a group of reading we need to complete by? Yes. So it won't be a, so Lawrence asked, will we have a schedule? It won't be so much as a schedule, but rather as a reading plan. Okay. So you work on the schedule based on your availability. I assume most of you are not going to cricket matches anymore on Sunday, as you surely used to go. So, you know, you've got a bit more free time. You've also got a lot of challenges because you're concerned about, you know, the situation, and you might be consuming news at an exceedingly silly rate. So try to manage yourself in a smart way, not just with this course, with any course, and go on to this reading schedule and be productive. Okay, and the fact that you'll be programming a bit more for this course is also a bit of a productive activity, because somehow programming is you create a computer program, even if it's a small program like we'll do from time to time, it becomes your friend. It gives you kind of a bit of feedback back, and you know, you go to sleep at night and you cuddle the program, and you know, you wake up in the morning and you press run again and it works again and you're happy. So that's kind of the philosophy I took. Now, of course, the other philosophy is that we're actually being, there's like the overarching model that we're going to aim for is what's called the stochastic, susceptible, infected, recovered, infective, recovered, or removed model, SIR. Okay, many of you have learned about SIR in the deterministic sense previously in other courses, and if you haven't, it's no big deal. I recommend you can look at it anyway. And a few days ago, I sent a link to the book chapter that's not part of this reading, that's in the Epidemic modeling book about the deterministic SIR. Okay, the stochastic SIR is, for us, it'll be kind of where we're going to go by first understanding discrete time Markov chains and then going on to continuous time Markov chains. So it's somehow relevant to what's happening in the world. The model we're going to be doing in this course is much more simplistic. So don't get it wrong. In no way is this an epidemics modeling course. It's a stochastic modeling course motivated by this severe application that humanity is now undergoing. I'm guessing that something like 1 out of 15 of you, or maybe 1 out of 10, will find this not appealing. because you actually want to shut out all the epidemics that are happening, or the pandemic that's happening around. And if you're stressed by this, please let me know. But my underlying belief was that actually 9 out of 10, or maybe 14 out of 15 of you will find this slightly more enriching. Okay. Now hold on for a quick sec. Okay, I had to silence some children. That's another problem that much of the world is dealing with. Now, Jason says my programs are my enemies. Okay, that's thanks for coming out with that, Jason. More. Okay, should we get a bit more concrete? All right, let's do that. So let's look first of all just at the material, at the 12 chapters. Okay. Now, in a way, in the next few weeks, oh wait, Matthew Lowe, quick question. How long will the problem set be roughly? So Matthew Lowe is asking a question about the problem set that is at the end of the semester, and it will be in the order of like an extended assignment, a longer assignment. But it'll be problems that are in a sense preparing you for the exam. The exam won't be those same problems, but it'll be problems that are preparing you for the exam. Okay, so I'll start discuss. Did that answer? I believe it did. I'll start with looking at the material. And in a sense, one of the most important chapters that we have is SP1. SP1, that's chapter 1 of Markov chains from Duret. So I'll speak about this chapter in a minute. I just need to depart the computer for a slight sec. So hold on tight. All right, so the book of Richard Duret, Stochastic Essentials, what is it called? It's called, Essentials of Stochastic Processes. It's the 3rd edition, is in a sense an introductory book. It's pretty much at the level of the course, okay? That's a book of Duret. And this chapter just has Markov chains pretty much from start to end, speaks about here the gambler's ruin that we've already seen, and transition probabilities, a lot of modeling, and all kinds of constructions of Markov chains, etc. And then goes to multi-step transition probabilities. And this is something that we've already, so this thing, oops, so let's see that this works. So this is something that the thing I'm highlighting now, that we've done in class in the Friday before we went on the pause week. Okay, so the multi-step transition probabilities, which is a probability from I to J in M steps. Okay, that's pretty much what we've done. And it's an elementary book. It's an elementary book. So this should be easy, fun reading, but I can't stress this enough. And you know, in your degree these days, you're reading a bit less than what, say, I did in my degree back in the days, or other similar professors. Okay, so when you read, you have a piece of paper next to you, and you actually reconstruct the examples. Okay, that's what it means to read a mathematical text. Okay. So that's a lot of fun, and I will do a highlight YouTube video where I'm kind of going over this chapter, putting it here, and highlighting certain steps. Okay, so that's SP1. Okay, now related to it, we have the chapter MC1, and that's in the Book of North. Now this book is a much more rigorous book. Okay. Both authors do rigorous probability, but this book of Duret, Essentials of Stochastic Processes, is kind of and easygoing introductory book, and this book is much more rigorous. So it's written like a mathematical text where you have theorem and proof and theorem and proof, etc. Okay. We will cover certain things from this book, but most of the things we won't. All right. So I'll highlight certain things that you need to see from this book. But it's just beautifully written, and that's the book Markov chains. All right. So chapter 1 is a whole discrete time content. Now, just so you have a view of in kind of in the world of discrete time Markov chains, there's in a sense a step from finite state space to countably infinite state space. We're not speaking about uncountable state spaces in this course. Okay, so it's either finite state, countably infinite. We left last Friday and we did the two-state Markov chain. Okay, so that's extremely finite. Okay, I mean the one-state Markov chain you finished. That's kind of, you did that 2 years ago. One-state Markov chain, boring. Right, two states starts to get slightly interesting. We did that. Okay, when you have finite state Markov chains, you can use linear algebra freely. When you go to infinite state spaces, countably infinite state spaces, then some subtleties occur. And some of these appear in this book, whereas in the other book, they're only touched on more loosely. Okay, so that's the Markov chain book. So in a sense, these two references, MC1 and SP1, are our discrete time. Okay, now that was my daughter speaking back to me, and this is like phenomena. Whoa. All right. So the SP1 and MC1 are the discrete time Markov chains. When we are going to move on to continuous time, and we'll do it sooner rather than later. And for that, we have the chapter SP2, which speaks about a Poisson process. Now, a Poisson process can be viewed as a Markov chain, but is more often than not isn't. Okay, so in a sense, it's a Markov chain. I'll just show you what this thing is about loosely. So it's a Markov chain with states. See, there's a bit of a delay here. Okay, so you go from this state to this state, and then from this state to this state, and then from this state to this state, and from this state to this state, and you call the state 0 and 1 and 2. I see you got a bit of a delay in disappearing. Okay, 0, 1, and 2, and the next one is 3, and the next one is 4, etc., etc., and it goes on forever. Okay. Now it's kind of like a random walk where you're only walking in one direction. Okay. Now the thing about continuous time Markov chains is you don't go with a certain probability. I mean, within a given time, you go within a certain probability, but you go with an intensity, and you just call this intensity lambda. So this intensity is kind of about how quickly you go from state to state. Now, it turns out that the state here can be viewed as the number of events that have occurred up to some time. Okay, so if we are now in state 4, at some given time, so I've highlighted state 4, you'll see that in a second, then the number of events that have occurred up to that time is 4. Okay, and this is important because, you know, things count up. So it's a case of sometimes people call it, it's a case of a point process, because you can actually draw on the timeline. If this is a timeline, you'll see the timeline in a second. So you'll say you had a point here, and you had a point here, and you had a point here. You'll see those X's appearing in the timeline. And these are events that appeared in time. And that means that here the state was at first 0, and now up to here. And now the state is 1 between those 2 points. And then the state is 2. And then the state is 3. Okay. So your transitioning state as point occurs. So that's a Poisson process. It turns out that understanding a Poisson process is a fundamental component of understanding continuous time Markov chains. So here I've drawn it in this thing I'm covering with a square as a special case of a continuous time Markov chains, but it's also studied in its own right. And guess what? It's intimately related with what distribution? Think fish, think French, the Poisson distribution. So the Poisson process is intimately related to the Poisson distribution because the distribution of the number of events at time t is actually Poisson distributed with lambda t. But it's also intimately related with the exponential distribution and with the Erlang distribution, which is the sum of IID exponential random variables, and actually with a few other distributions. So it's a very natural process that appears in nature and is related to continuous time Markov chains. So that's this chapter SP2. Okay. So we've discussed SP1, SP2, and MC1. Okay. Then we have 3 chapters dealing with continuous time Markov chains. All right? Now, you got to already think that some things in life appear in a very discrete nature. If we're speaking about seasons, or if we're speaking about the close of stock market days, or if we're speaking about something that's sampled every hour discretely, and some things happen continuously. When we spoke about the branching process, you'll see it as an example of a discrete time Markov chains where each time is a generation. But of course, there's a continuous time generalization of the branching process. And actually, epidemics are very much related to the branching process. At the moment, COVID-19 is kind of behaving like a branching process with mu somewhere between 2 and 3. And you remember from the first 2 weeks that branching processes with mu greater than 1 grow up quickly, most probably. I mean, it's possible that, you know, it will suddenly die off, certainly not, but with very low probability in Italy, and unfortunately here as well too. Okay, maybe in Tasmania, yes. All right. As opposed to that, a branching process with mu less than 1 dies off. Okay, social distancing is all about pushing that mu at least to be as close to 1 or less than 1 as possible, and it exponentially dies off. By the way, something you can take away and tell your friends, etc. Everybody's speaking about the exponential growth, but exponential growth is also exponential decay. Okay, if mu is less than 1. All right, so that was kind of an offshoot to branching processes. But now back to the general continuous time Markov chains, which sometimes people call the Markov processes. So for this, we have the chapters SP4, MC2, and MC3. Okay. At this point, I recommend just browsing through these chapters, not reading them fully, but there'll be a reading plan. Okay. Now, guess what? Since SP4, the Richard Durrett book, The Essential Stochastic Processes, is the easier book, this chapter is actually the one that's going to really serve as the working chapter for us. Okay. And since you have, for the probabilities of Markov chains, you have difference equations. For the probabilities of continuous time Markov chains, you have differential equations. And these are called the Chapman-Markov equations, and we'll analyze them in detail. Okay, so a lot of the examples of here deal with all kinds of things that I've worked with before. For example, queues. Okay, so this concept, an MMSQ, is a queue, say a supermarket queue, where there are S servers, S people working, and people arrive to the queue according to a Poisson process and are each served with exponential processing times. Okay, so that's a continuous time Markov chain. However, we'll put less emphasis on queues and yes, put more emphasis on epidemics, just because it's kind of more relevant for us. Okay. So just like you have this chapter, you have the companion MC3 and MC6. So let's go back here and see them. So in the Norris book, and these are the more rigorous chapters. So MC2 and MC3. Okay, continuous time Markov chains 1 and 2. So this really goes into quite an extensive look at continuous time Markov chains. Part of the complication is, again, if state spaces are non-finite. Okay, and we'll touch some of these things and gloss over others. So, for example, here we're looking at MC2, continuous time Markov chains 1, in the book of Norris, the more rigorous book. So we discuss here what's called a Q matrix, which will be very clear to you soon, and that's what sometimes we call a generator matrix. And in continuous time Markov chain, the main object that we do is we take e to the power qt, okay, where t is a scalar and q is an element of R n by n. Okay, that's if the state space is finite. And this thing is called a matrix exponential. I'm sure you love matrix exponentials. You might have seen these in Math 2000 or some other course, or used them elsewhere. So whenever you're solving systems of differential equations, linear time homogeneous differential equations, you've got matrix exponentials. So this thing plays a key role. However, the book is more complicated because sometimes this Q is not just a finite matrix, it's an infinite collection, and hence there's some bigger complications that we'll need to deal with, some bigger mathematical complications. All right. Okay, so that kind of deals with the core theory, but there's also one chapter here, which is a supporting chapter really, and that the appendix, they call it chapter 6. Okay, chapter 6 of Norris, it's the appendix on rigorous probability. Okay. And I will create a reference or two for this chapter. And what this is really a measure theoretic probability course, just on cases where the state spaces are countably infinite. You see, measure theoretic probability is a tool that allows you to understand random variables in a slightly more rigorous way, or random processes in general, by, say, not just thinking of discrete or continuous random variables, but rather thinking of just random variables that have any probability distribution. And then there's a whole bunch of rules of changing that derive from the theory of changing the order of expectation and limits and all kinds of things like that. Okay. Now, in a full course of measure theory, you'll deal with random variables that can take any value. Here, because it's very specific to Markov chains, what the author Norris, Markov chains by James Norris, has done is he has spoken about measure theory in the context of discrete infinite, meaning uncountable state spaces. And we then speak about what measures are, what a probability space are, speak about the basic theorems. So it's good that you're actually acquainted with the basic theorems, such as Fubini's theorem and the monotone convergence theorem, and a few modes of convergence and others. Okay, so you will have some exposure to measure theory, but it's really specific for the application of Markov chains. Okay, so then those of you that wanted a bit more measure theory afterwards, I think especially the finance people. Is there still a stock market? I'm not sure if that's maybe, might have closed that thing. I'm not sure. But the finance people anyway, no, that's still an important profession for humanity. Okay, so you'll want to kind of take what you know from here and then apply it later on in further courses. Just for general measure theory. The stock market is online now. Good, Ashley. Can you sell a few stocks for me? Thank you. All right, moving on. So then we've got our application book. So the application book is a book by Daryl Daly and Joe Gunny. Nice fact, they're both Australian. Daryl Daly is over 80 years old. We corresponded a bit last week. He's also written a book about point processes. So this guy, Daryl Daly, I believe that Joe Gunny passed away. He's at an age of 100 or so. I'm not sure. I might be wrong, but he's 100 if he hasn't, and he's at ANU. So they did a lot in applied probability in Australia and our world now. Okay, so they're Australian. So this book of theirs, Epidemic Modeling, is a specific book for epidemics. Markov chains are used there as a main tool. We will skip chapter 1 and chapter 2, but have a bit of a read just to get a feel for what it is. Okay, and I think I sent that to you a few days ago, okay, about chapter 1 and chapter 2. And most of the people that are thinking today about epidemics are thinking in the realm of chapter 2 of discrete modeling. Sometimes they do kind of very, like there was recently a paper a few days ago that influenced policy in the UK and will eventually influence policy here in Australia probably as well, by Ferguson from University College London. So they have stochastic models, but generally when people speak about academics, they speak about the deterministic models that just work with nice differential equations. However, by thinking about stochasticity, which is what our goal in this course, then you can actually think about the actual contact that can happen between two people and then the transfer of the disease, etc., and also the decay of the disease in a discrete manner. And that actually happens to be very relevant for early stages of the disease. It might be that here in Australia, at least with this wave, we're beyond that early stage. So the methods of stochastic modeling are used in epidemics and help this thinking. And in no way do you come out of this course and you can solve the world problems, as I wrote in the email and also in the website, but maybe if you take part in further research associated with this pandemic and mitigating it, and there'll be other questions about how to kind of bring stuff back up and how to reinstantiate flights and suddenly redo the Olympics and a whole bunch of things. So thinking about in terms of epidemic modeling, there will unfortunately be a market, or fortunately, or that's just the way it is for it. And hence that's why we'll focus on that. Now, one thing that's kind of contrary to the Markov chain literature and kind of the way books are written. So in this book, they started with chapter 3, which they say is perhaps the most important in the book, and it's in continuous time. So of course, as a prereq for this, we need to rather quickly understand what are Markov chains in continuous time, as we will within a few weeks, okay? And kind of the goal is to think about this SIR model, which is the susceptible, infected, removed, or recovered. You can call the R removed or recovered. Unfortunately, there's some of them are just removed from the population. That's the SIR model. Okay, so that's going to be kind of our main example. But also for completeness, there is a follow-up chapter here, which is EM4. Let me try to open it. It's not opening. You can do it, chapter 4, EM4. Very stubborn chapter. I'm pressing with the iPad. Press, not opening. Press. iPad's tired. Hold on. No, doesn't want to open. Chapter 3 opens. Chapter 4 doesn't want to open. Okay, I don't know why. But there's chapter EM4. Chapter 4 you can open, you can do it. I'm going to move you to trash, chapter 4. I'm going to move you to trash, no, chapter 4. Chapter 4, I'm moving you to trash if you don't open. No, and then those threats don't work when my kids start with chapter 4. Anyway, EM4 is the, okay, and Ashley tells me try downloading it again. Thank you, Ashley. That's a very good idea. Ashley, good one. Good, thanks. All right, we will later on. All right, so chapter 4 is a discrete time counterpoint. All right, so that covers these 2 chapters. Now we come to my favorite, and that's what we're going to play with a little bit. Well, my favorite because I'm a bit biased because I kind of wrote the damn thing. Okay, so, and that's the Statistics with Julia book. All right, now with the Statistics with Julia book, chapters 2 and 3 are really supporting chapters. And you can also go to chapter 1, even though I didn't write it. So we're not learning any of the things of chapters 2 and 3. Chapter 2 is all about discrete probability, and have a look at that chapter. And that's chapter 2. And chapter 3 has an explanation of continuous distributions, all with examples. So the idea there is not theorem proof, but rather, hey, here is a mathematical property. Here are some things that we do. Okay, so that's chapters 2 and 3. The real important chapter, and your project will be similar to will have a few things that are similar to what's in that chapter, is chapter 10, simulation of dynamic models. So let's go there. Now, before that, you all had to choose a programming language to work with. That's one of the things I asked you to do. And you can change, right? But I hope that you did, okay? So a few of you have probably used Julia. So then if you start kind of using Julia, the plus for you is that that's the code, I'm giving code in Julia, but the minus is you'll have all kinds of growing pains with Julia. I mean, the plus is also that you'll have growing pains, so later on you'll know how to use Julia. But I assume that all of you have used either MATLAB or Python or one of those 3, and that's these are kind of the natural choices. If you guys want to start kind of shooting just in the chat quickly, kind of the programming language you'll want to use for the project. Just type it in quickly and set enter, enter, enter. So let's see like a bunch of programming languages in the chat. Python, R, okay, we got Python, Python, R, Julia, Alistair, Julia, Gig, R, Python, Python, assembly. No, I'm joking, nobody said that. Python, Python or R, Python or R. Isabel's undecided, Python or R. Okay, good. Okay, assembly. Oh, Lawrence is doing an assembly. Lawrence, you're hardcore. Avril Jane Fortran, okay, also hardcore, yes. You guys can also kind of use punch cards if you want. All right, good. So you're gonna be programming, or C maybe, yeah, good. Okay, you guys are kind of trying to impress. Undecided, nobody said JavaScript. Okay, fine. All right, so programming. I'm not gonna teach you how to program. You're gonna learn by yourself, but I'm here at 11, and at 11 on Tuesday and Friday, feel free to ask me questions about the programming. There's also going to be the Piazza page, so feel free to throw things there and help each other. There is a Piazza page, but I still have not done anything. Jason's doing it in HTML. Maybe you want to do it in JPEG, Jason? No? Jason, maybe you just want kind of to draw. Yeah. HTML just won't cut it, but HTML and JavaScript will. Okay. Lisp scheme, sure, good. All right. I mean, look, at least we're having fun. I don't know. You seem to be having fun. I don't know. That's good. All right. Let's get to Julia. All right. So this chapter 10 is going to be part of your first reading, actually. So when we wrote this chapter, it's coming at the end of the book that's mostly focused about statistics. And it's speaking about dynamics models. Okay, so most of the book is not about dynamic models, but this chapter speaks about dynamic models. Okay, and the basic paradigm that's being presented is this recursion. I've spoken about such things before, where the state at the next time is a function of the state at the current time and some orange randomness here. Okay, so that's how you kind of evolve a dynamic model. But there's also a continuous time component. Now, the first section of the book, of this chapter, of what we call in our language SWJ10, so we're in SWJ10. So the first is all about deterministic dynamical systems, okay? And it might be that some of you might want to just do, and that's not in the book, in retrospect, I think it should be, and maybe we'll add it because it's just so relevant, the deterministic SIR. Okay, so can I just see in the chat who's actually done something with SIR before in a different course? Yes, yes, no, no, yes, 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 no, 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 yes, no. I mean, I know we can do polling, but just kind of yep, 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 no, yep, no. I see no, yes, nope, 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 no, good. Okay, nope, 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 nope. Okay, a lot of no's. Okay, so I might actually just create kind of an auxiliary quick video about this. Those videos are not going to be very good, right? But they'll be, but neither are the lectures. But still, I mean, you can watch them. All right. So in a deterministic system is just like this is what we had in the first week of the semester. Okay, so we spoke about this system where the function f of u was just 2 times u. Okay, that's a doubling system, right? And you also have the differential equation analog. All right, so that's fine. A discrete time system, this thing's called predator-prey. Those of you that did SIR probably saw predator-prey. So this is like a model of a system where your state, okay, the state is 2-dimensional. So you represent the state as a 2-dimensional vector where one is the predator and the other is a prey, okay? Now there is a prey, so this is like foxes and rabbits in a forest. And then a trajectory of the system is you start here with this is predator, this is prey, and the system goes pound, 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 and converges to some deterministic steady state. Okay, that's kind of boring. You also have continuous time analog like this one where you're pushing a mass, you're kind of applying a bit of force to it. So there's a spring that pulls the mass, and this is all oil. Okay, a pretty good commodity to have. Okay, so you put the oil here and you're pulling it here, and then this thing kind of moves back and forth. And there are ordinary differential equations, which are these, which describe how this thing moves. All right, a system of 2 equations where x1 and x2 are the state of the system. So this is going to be like over time for one variable. Okay, that's a displacement over time. That would be a solution, but you can also view the trajectory of the system here on the two-dimensional state. Okay, so that's all deterministic, fine. You'll just need to browse through that. But now we're coming to the main reading that I'll ask you to do very shortly for the next few days, and that's the Markov chains, okay? Described in a very loose manner. I mean, keep in mind, this book is designed for data scientists and such that are not necessarily kind of doing a degree in mathematics, okay? But there's a description here of Markov chains, which in my view is kind of the best initial description I would have. And specifically also the fact that you can view the Markov chain either, no thank you, either via transition probabilities as your model, or via the stochastic recursion, okay? So that's kind of the two views. And when we get to the first example takes some simple Markov chain and actually looks at some random quantity associated with trajectories of the Markov chain. So that random quantity is this random variable tau, which let's see if we can read this tau. That's the minimal time such that there exists a time t0, t1, t2, t3, and t4. So the minimal yellow t, the infinite t, such that we have visited state I. Okay. Right. So it's the minimal time such that we visited all states. Okay. So it's a time where, minimal time where all states have been visited. All right. So it means that at time xt, if this is like a 3, we've been in state 3. And at time t4, we've been in state 4. Okay. So it's kind of the covering time. So it's just looking at the Markov chain, and that's why we do simulation for it. Although for this one, you can actually do some analysis. It's looking at the Markov chain saying, hey, what is the minimal time until you actually visited all states? It's not just hitting time. It's like hitting the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one. There are a total of 4 or 5 states, 0 to 4. Okay. The transition probability matrix is this, and those of you that are astute can already see this transition probability matrix and see that it has this form. And this is kind of, it's like a circular one. Okay. Like you can go from any state to any state or stay in place. You can go right, left, etc. With probability third. Right. Okay. And Isabel tells me these were barely touched on in Psi 1000, the SIR predator-prey models. Right. Okay, good. Right. I mean, in Psi 1000, you guys were, I don't know if you had hands already. We're still kind of involved. Sure. We'll do something very quickly about the SIR. Of course, no. But yeah, I know that, yeah, the predator-prey in Psi 1000 one such model. Thanks, Isabel. All right. So let's spend, and the way this works is you can actually download this code, run it in Julia, change parameters and play with it. But ideally, it's actually pretty good. Those of you that are doing this in Python R, you might take this code and port it to Python R and kind of see that you can play with this code and see, you know, the main point. So there's more here on Markov chains, and this is this chapter. In the remaining 3 minutes or 7 minutes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the share on this device, stop the broadcast, and I'm going to share my desktop. Not my email, my desktop. Okay. All right. You see my desktop, I assume. And what I'm going to do here is go back to these examples and just show you how I run one in Julia. And this is specifically for those that want to do something in Julia. Okay. So out of curiosity, could you, for those of you that have just, if we can get a quick chat response, if you have chosen to use Julia and are don't say no, but just say yes or nothing. So if you've chosen to use Julia and did you install it? Has anybody chosen to use Julia and install it? Just write a yes. I just can't see my chat window somehow. Okay, I see a bit yes. Okay, Matt, Alistair, Jan, thanks. Okay. Okay, if you've chosen to use R, do you have it running? Or let's say like this, from the one, no, don't answer a second. From the ones that are not using Julia, if you've chosen to use R or Python, anybody does not have a framework running, say, I don't have, if somebody doesn't have. So you all have a framework running of Python or R, so you can all compute. I haven't seen any, no. Okay. And has anybody chosen to use Julia or perhaps might use Julia and has not installed it? So these are people that will, I might, Nicholas might. Okay, okay. Maybe, Jemima, maybe. All right, good. So the way I use Julia, you can use, there's not a great IDE maybe, and Ashley might use Julia now, but only have R, Python, and MATLAB installed. Okay, good. All right, so there's not, the nice thing about MATLAB and R, you've got a great IDE. And IDE, you know, IDE, Integrated Development Environment. Python has all kinds of IDEs, like, so who uses PyCharm? Can you just say yes, 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 if PyCharm is your IDE, if Python? Jason is, Jason, I think you do assembly, no? No, okay, yes, 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 okay. Who uses Spider for the Python IDE? Yep, 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 yep. Okay, I see Spider at Uni. We don't have Uni anymore. Okay, who uses idle? It's Python IDE? Nobody, okay, because it's not good enough. All right, yuck. Isabel, I'm sorry for grossing you out. All right, all right, something quick. Okay, if you need idle, for something quick. That's a more mature response, Will, thank you. All right, we done Julia? Okay. Now, Avira said, would you know if most of the things that can be done in Julia can also be done in Python? The answer is yes. Everything you can do in Julia, you can do in Python, but the code is going to be uglier. So Python is not designed for numerical computation. There's NumPy in there, which is a great library and augments Python for numerical computation, but Python computation does not look like MATLAB. Julia programs look like Python, but the numerical part just looks like MATLAB. And they run faster if later on you want to do things in a performant way. The negative is that there are resources all around our world for Python, and for Julia, there are fewer resources. And the positive is you have some resources from me, but you have from others as well. Now, Avir asks, would you know if most of the things you can do with regard to course? I mean, yes. So you can do anything will work. Python, Julia, R, MATLAB, all good. Okay, let me just do a quick thing with Julia. So I run Julia with a Jupyter notebook. You've seen these in class already, okay? But I've never kind of said anything about them. Who has not used it? Just if I see a few no's about Jupyter notebook, and then I could say a word about that, because that's a useful tool today. Or has I'm assuming everybody's seen Jupyter notebooks. Well, you might have seen them in class. Is anybody not used? Yeah, Ashley, yes means you've seen. Has anybody not used a Jupyter notebook? I don't know. Okay. All right. So the slight annoying thing once you get a Jupyter notebook, and you can use Jupyter, by the way, both for Python and Julia. Okay. And the nice thing about Jupyter notebook is I'm actually going to ask you to submit your projects in a way that is most easily done in Jupyter notebooks, but you don't have to do it in Jupyter notebooks. Okay. So that's the easiest way. So just so you see an example, let's go to a course that I taught last semester, math, not math, but rather math 7502. So we'll go like 5 minutes over time. Does anybody have an urgent meeting with a grocer or something? No? Okay, well, you don't need to run to the next class, right? Get it? Okay, so, all right, just 5 minutes, 3 minutes. So this course, Math 7502, it's a course I taught last semester, and here at the bottom, you have projects done by students, okay? So this group 9 did a project on something called constraint optimization. All right, that was their project. What they created is a YouTube video, and you might create something like that for your project, but not necessarily, because that's a bit overkill. Okay, but more importantly, they created kind of a reproducible document, and here it is. Oh, this is their summary. Okay, that's a summary on their constraint optimization. Fine. Okay, but they also created like a reproducible document, which is a Jupyter document. Okay, this group actually didn't do it as according to that, but let's go to the next one. Let's look at this one. So you see there's an IPYNB file. That's a Jupyter notebook file. And this is their document. Now look, it has here stuff written out in Markdown, and it has computation. Okay, so Jupyter notebooks are good for combining presentation and computation. Okay, it's not like an IDE where you have everything kind of in different files in an organized way, but for kind of putting things together and or experimenting with things, Jupyter notebooks are good. And here I'm going to do a new notebook. Now I can choose if it's going to be connected to a Python kernel or a Julia kernel. It can also be an R kernel should I have R installed. So one thing I urge most of you to do is to use Jupyter notebooks, because presenting in that will be easy. Okay, and then this can be my project. Okay, that's the name of it. Now cells can either be code or Markdown. So Markdown, just so you know this is a Markdown cell. Okay, and somebody's writing something in the chat. 1 second. So now Hugh says, if we know how to use R Markdown, can we do it in that format instead? If so, how should we submit the project? So yes, the answer to you is yes, 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 yes. You can do anything you want. The formatting instructions will not be very stringent. They just need to be, you'll need a coherent document, okay? And a coherent document is also with reproducible code, potentially reproducible code. So yes, if you can use R Markdown, that's perfect. Now, Matthew Lowe says, is it still okay to use listings plus tech? Do we need to submit something with interactive plots or anything like that? No. The answer is you can, but no. Okay, so that's the base is just a project, which is kind of a written report. Simple. Okay. Now, my kid texted me, can I get something to eat to please? No, I'm still in the lesson. Now, is there Julia Markdown? So Markdown is a Jupyter thing. No, there's not a Julia Markdown or Markdown. It's not as good as Julia Markdown. But there is a Jupyter notebook, and it says this is my Markdown cell, and this is now, this is an equation, f of x equals inf of t greater equal than 0, such that e to the power x is less than t. For example. And this is LaTeX. Okay. So the two associated tools here, and if somebody has never used this in one, I'll quickly send you links anyway to Markdown. Markdown is easy to use. LaTeX requires a bit more, and you can do computation here, right? So I'll close with going to the Statistics with Julia book. Let's say here, okay, and let's take, for example, take chapter 1, because I think I referred you to this chapter, and this is steady state of a Markov chain. So in the Statistics with Julia book, I'm going to click this link. It'll put me in GitHub, okay, and then I'm going to hit raw. That's one way of doing it right there, and I'm going to select all and copy. So that's a way of copying this from the book, right? Because for the book you have this PDF, and copying from the PDF doesn't work very well. Okay, and then you can paste this here and do Shift Enter, and this thing is going to run. And this is the example that we used in class, but we only spoke about pretty much. And if I do escape L, I see the lines. We only spoke about up to line 9. This was an approximation for the steady state distribution of this discrete time Markov chain. Keep in mind, Julia actually appears slow because it's compiled, it's not interpreted. And sometimes when you use packages, it takes a while to load those packages. That will be fixed someday. So that's his code, and then you can try and do that. Now, one last thing about Jupyter, if you haven't used it, it's an environment where when you hit the escape key, so I'm hitting escape on the keyboard, and now I'm in what's called command mode, and then I can use all those keyboard shortcuts. There's a whole bunch of keyboard shortcuts, okay? Now, I don't use most of them, but for example, I can select the cell and I'm in escape mode. I just hit the button X. I hit the X key, X, it deletes, okay? All right, so it's kind of like the editor VI, or I can hit the A and it goes above. And then when I'm in a cell and I want to do my program is good, and I try to run that, and of course I'm going to get a mistake because there's not such a program. My program is good. Okay, so I did Shift Enter is running. Shift Enter runs. So that's Jupyter, and you can export, etc. So I think that's pretty much it. Get going on there are no action items here for you, with the exceptions of the ones we've sent before, which is look at those first 2 chapters of the Daily Ghani book if you haven't, just for motivation. Download the 12 reading chapters. On those we spoke about extensively. Choose your programming language, get your environment going, and later on today you will get suggestions for the initial reading, and we'll meet Friday, most probably in a mode of you already asking questions. Okay. Are there any questions before we finish? No? Okay, you guys want to go. Fair enough. Me too. Okay, so see you guys Friday at 11. Send up the question on chat. What is that? It's not a question. Oh, what version of Julia should we use? Good question. 1.3, I think. So the latest stable. Maybe it's 1.4 already. So 1.3 or 1.4. Very similar. So use the stable. Okay, use a stable. Oh, sorry, I'm answering to the wrong person. Answer to everyone. Use a stable. Other questions? Cheers. That's not a question. Other ones? Thank you. All right, guys, stay positive. It is what it is. Interesting times. All right, see you Friday. Bye.